Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 4th Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, June 18th at 6 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you, and I would request everyone please silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices as to not to be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your indulgence. And we'll move on to roll call, please. I'd ask all the supervisors to please sign in. And thank you. And I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us here today. And thank you for your, and also the viewing audience, and thank you for your interest in Marathon County government. And we will move on to educational presentations and or reports and start with item number B7, Marathon County Special Education. And we have Kelly Koplitz. Kelly, please.
Great. Good evening. I feel like I'm a little bit at church. Let me try that again. Good evening.
Good evening.
Today's reading will be, no, just joking. Thank you for having me. I am Kelly Kapitz. I am the director at Marathon County Special Education, and I'm happy to be here to share a little bit about who we are under the county umbrella. And then, of course, I have a request, which I will share with you. For those of you that are veterans, this will be a review. And for those of you that are new, this will be a nice little overview of who we are and how we're connected to the county. And first of all, we are a county disabilities education board, and we are statutorily created. And at the moment, we serve 6 of the 10 districts in Marathon County. And those districts are Abbotsford, Athens, Edgar, Marathon, Rosholt, and Spencer. I have to do them in order, otherwise I get them a little mixed up. But that being said, we are an organization that provides all things related to special education. So special education teachers, paraeducators, occupational physical therapists, and the list goes on. If it's associated with providing services to kids with disabilities, we are the folks who provide that. At the moment, we serve 570 students, and if we were showing a video, which we will not do tonight, but you can see and check out on our website, you can watch a quick video about who we are as an organization, and also at that website, we also have the Birth to 3 side. That would be a nice overview, should you have some free time that you want to check that out. A little brief history. In 1951, Marathon County Board of Supervisors hired its first special education teacher for the entire county, one teacher, whole county. And not shortly after that, they also hired a speech and language pathologist, one speech and language pathologist, one teacher for an entire county. But then in 1957, the state law required that all counties create at the time, what was called a County Handicapped Children's Education Board in all of the counties. And that was later changed to the County Children with Disabilities Education Board. We shortened that to CDEB. In 1958, we held our very first CDEB meeting. And at that time, as I mentioned, we served all 10 schools in the county. But in 1987, then things changed. We restructured, and the services were not for all 10 districts, but then became part of 6 districts. And we were no longer part of the tax roll. So the way we existed previously was you taxed for our services, and that's how we provided it. Today, however, we are celebrating 66 years of services to kids with disabilities, and we continue as an independent but connected entity. We have an independent board and governing structure, and our funding comes from three sources, primarily state and federal aid, and then also primarily from the districts that we actually serve. And we're unique. We are one of 4 CDEBs left in the state, but even among the 4 that exist, we are unique because we are not on a county tax base roll. Later, in 2018, we actually took on the birth to 3 role for Lincoln, Langlade, and Marathon counties. And then in 2019, we also took on from the health department the vision and hearing screening, which we provide to all districts in the county, both public and private. This last year, as we ended our school year, we screened over 15,000 students in this area. So why am I here today? I'm here because even though we are a separate entity, statutorily speaking, when new board members are being appointed to our board, we have to bring that request to the larger board. And so we have a retiring board member in Abbotsford who's retiring after many years, and the school district of Abbotsford is asking that a new board member be appointed, and that board member's name is Selenia Espino. And so what I'm here today to do is to ask your permission to have her be appointed to our board. Are there any questions?
So we open it up to questions from the board. Any questions? Well, seeing none, I think, Kelly, you provided all the answers everybody needed, so thank you.
Good. I did that in 5 minutes or less. I feel pretty good about that. Thank you
Very good.
much.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we're so honored to have with us this evening the outreach coordinator from WCA, Sarah Dietrich Kasdorf, and so she will be providing an education presentation to the board for supervisors on the roles and responsibilities. For some supervisors, this may be refresher. For some others, well, for everybody, it'll be a refresher if you attended the orientation that we had, but I thought it'd be appropriate after 2 months worth of being on the job to have WCA go through those roles and responsibilities and give us a little bit of opportunity to ask questions. So with that, Sarah Dietrich Kasdorf, please.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As Chair Gibbs stated, I'm Sarah Dietrich Kasdorf. I'm the Director of Outreach and Member Engagement for the Wisconsin Counties Association. By way of background, I've been with WCA for, oh gosh, it'll be 33 years in September now. I spent the first 30 years of that as a lobbyist for the association, and I spent the last 2.5 years in my new role as the Director of Outreach and Member Engagement. So in this new capacity, I get to travel around the state, visiting various county boards, various county officials, speaking to different county organizations, telling them all the wonderful things that we get to do as counties, and you know, working with county officials to make sure that we're doing things the way we're supposed to be doing things, whether it's, you know, by policy, practice, procedure, or by state statute. So again, I do appreciate the opportunity to come back and visit with you guys this evening. So I should ask, how many of you guys heard this at our county officials workshops this year? A couple of you? Okay, good. Good. And my apologies for not remembering how many from Marathon County attended COWS this year. But we had a very good showing at COWS. Glad that at least 4 of you were there, so that's perfect. So for you guys, this will pretty much be a repeat, which means I may get to pick on you and ask you, to, jump in at certain points and answer all my questions correctly. So with that, I think I'll get started in the interest of time, as I know you do have a lengthy agenda. So if you see me skipping slides, don't panic about it. Don't think you're missing out on anything. Sometimes there's a bit of overkill in our written PowerPoint presentations. And so if I skip slides, just know in the interest of time, I'm just not going to keep repeating the same points over and over and over again. So let's get started. And we'll talk about county government and county structure. So really the answer to many of the questions that folks have with regard to county government can be found in Chapter 59 of the state statutes. It's Chapter 59 of the state statutes that talks about such things as county structure. It talks about county officers. It talks about, the powers and duties of our county officers. It is where county permissive authority lies. So again, most of the questions that somebody would have about how county governments operate could be found in Chapter 59 of the state statutes. But unfortunately, it's not so simple. Chapter 59 is not the only chapter of the statute that we as county officials need to make sure that we are aware of. For example, Chapter 19 of the statutes, that's where we find the open meetings law, the public records law. It's where we find the code of ethics for local public officials. All of these things are items that we as counties need to make sure we are aware of to make sure that we are not running afoul of various state statutes that do apply to us, because the consequences at times can be severe if we do that. But then there's other things in the statute, and it's that dreaded M word, mandates, those things that counties are required to do because we are considered to be arms of the state. Those mandated services are found all throughout the state statutes, whether it is, chapter, 46, 48, 51, 55, 938, 252, all of those are the chapters that just deal specifically with health and human services. And then there's chapter 83 that deals with county highways. There's chapter 753 that contains the mandate that says counties are responsible for funding all aspects of the court system with the exception of judges and court reporters. So again, there's mandated services all throughout the statutes. I'm going to tell you right now and up front, there is no expectation that any county supervisor memorizes Chapter 59, is aware and knows all of the statutes that affect counties and all of the mandates, and understands everything about the public records law and open meetings law. As much as we'd like to say, yeah, you need to be aware of it all, it is a lot. And so we know as county officials, we try to make sure that you are aware of these laws, and that these laws impact you and the work that you do and some of the decisions that you make at the county level. But ultimately, you cannot be an expert on everything county government. Like, I've been around for a very long time in county government. I learned something new every day about county government. I learned something new when I was at the Price County Board this morning talking about a different issue. So again, there's always something new and exciting to learn as part of county government. So again, counties are defined by statute in Chapter 59 as a body corporate that can sue and be sued. Basically, what that means is counties as a body corporate, you guys are, essence, the board of directors for that body corporate, and you enact your authority as members of the oversight body of the body corporate through the adoption of resolutions and through the enactment of ordinances. Counties, though, powers are limited by state statute. And this is where counties very much differ from our municipal counterparts. And I say that because municipalities have what is known as constitutional home rule authority. That means that the municipalities can basically undertake any function so long as it is not prohibited by state statute. For counties, it is precisely the opposite of that. We can only undertake those functions that are expressly allowed for either by the Constitution or by state statute. So we don't have the same types of flexibilities that our municipal partners tend to have. Now, there is one exception to that, and that deals with administrative home rule. I think that's the next slide. But again, a huge difference between counties and municipalities. The last thing I want to mention here and talk about is, and this is the most obvious thing I'm going to tell you tonight, that counties are governed by a board of supervisors. That we are told in Chapter 59. Chapter 59, though, does set different limitations upon the county boards, depending upon your county's population. Statutes limit the size of your county board. Now, that being said, I think you guys have the largest county board. Obviously, you do in the state. Now, I was trying to think, Mr. Chair, if I recall, you're the second largest in the whole country as a board. So again, you guys have a rather large board, compared to many other counties across the state. You guys are 38. Menominee County has a county board of 7. Now, they're a little bit of a different situation because their county board is made up of the 6 members of the town of Menominee plus 1 at-large member. So again, they're structured a little bit differently, but 7 to 38. And we have, I would say, probably the most popular number of county board members in each county is 21. That seems to be the number a lot of counties have landed on. All right, let's talk about a little bit about administrative home rule. So until the 1980s, counties did not really have any authority over its own administrative structures. So at that time, counties went to the legislature and we were granted administrative home rule authority. It's not the constitutional home rule authority I'm sure counties wish they had, but it's a little bit of a step down in that we have administrative home rule authority. And according to that statute, every county may exercise any organizational or administrative power subject only to the Constitution and to any enactment of the legislature which is of statewide concern and which uniformly affects every counties. And this is the statute that gives counties flexibility to determine what their departments look like, how many departments you have within county government, and what services you put under each of these departments. As an example, county child support falls in many different departments across the state. Sometimes child support is its own department. Sometimes child support is under the Health and Human Services Department. In other counties, it falls under the auspices of the Corporation Counsel Office. So again, it is that administrative home rule authority that gives us that type of flexibility. It's also that same type of flexibility that allows us as counties to set what our committee structures look like at the county level. But again, this administrative home rule authority, it's not without limitation. And you hear that a lot with county government. You can do this, but, and again, an example of this, back in 2010, the Ozaukee County Administrator asked the Attorney General whether or not he could give his appointment authority over boards and commissions to the county board chair because the county board chair was already making appointments to county committees. So he thought it made sense to allow the board chair to make appointments to boards and commissions. That appointment authority, though, falls by statute in 5918 to the county administrator. And the Attorney General said, yeah, no, you cannot do that under administrative home rule authority because, again, that is a statutory duty that is given to a county administrator, and as such, you cannot use your administrative home rule authority to supersede state statute. So again, not without limitation. Self-organization. This was a concept that was placed in state statute in the mid-1970s, and it gives county flexibility regarding certain and specific county board matters. I will tell you there are 52 counties across the state that are currently self-organized. I didn't grab my list to figure out whether or not, are you guys self-organized?
Yes, we are.
I would assume you would be.
Yep.
So there's 52 counties that are self-organized. If you are to become a self-organized county, you adopt an ordinance indicating your intention to become a self-organized county, and then you take that ordinance and you submit it to the Secretary of State's office. Boom, you're a self-organized county. But just doing that isn't enough. You don't have any new powers or authorities or duties automatically granted to you when you gain that self-organized status. Instead, counties have to take additional action. And there's 3 additional actions that a county that is self-organized can take. 2 of the 3, well, I should say at least the first one, I don't recommend any county do, and that is the use of staggered terms. And I can tell you there's not a single county in the state that has used staggered terms. I would surmise that is because counties are afraid of their county clerks. And what would happen if you had to hold an election for county board every single year? Now imagine on top of that, you guys just went through a reorganizational process. You're going through training. You're reestablishing committees. You're trying to get your feet wet on the new committee you're sitting on. Now imagine if you had an election and you had to redo that again every 12 months. How much work do you think you guys would be getting done as a county? Or would you be spending all of your time doing nothing but reorganizing and relearning things at the county level? So there are a lot of very good reasons why counties would never use staggered terms. Compensation of supervisors. That is another power that is granted to you if you are a self-organized county. Right now under state statute, there are limitations to the number of committee meetings that you can receive a per diem for based upon the size of your county. And so I can't remember exactly what the limits are. I don't remember if it's 10 committee meetings a year that you can receive a per diem for, I think for the same committee, something like that. That's right. Is that right? And so some counties will, instead of paying per diem, have chosen, because they are self-organized, to pay their county supervisors a salary in lieu of paying them a per diem. And you have that option again because of self-organization. And the final thing is filling county supervisor vacancies. For right now, I would say the vast majority of counties follow what is in statute anyway, where if there is a vacancy on a county board, generally the county board chair makes a recommendation to the board for the board's approval. That is typically what we see in every county, but if you are self-organized, you can have a different manner in which you choose to fill county board supervisor vacancies. Again, though, if you don't want your county clerk mad at you, I would not suggest holding a special election to fill a county supervisory vacancy. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about forms of county government. Now, there are 3 different forms of county government. Each county is required by statute to have one of these 3 forms of county government. There's the county executive, the county administrator, and the county administrative coordinator. I'm going to talk, well, we'll see how much I talk about all 3 of these. So first is a map here. And what this map shows is really what we're looking at like on a statewide basis with regard to these 3 different forms of county government. We have 12 counties that have chosen to have elected county executives. They're primarily on that eastern and southeastern part of the state. And then we have 33 full-time appointed county administrators, which is what Marathon County currently has. And then we have 8 individuals who are appointed full-time administrative coordinators, meaning they have the title of administrative coordinator. They are full-time, but they do not necessarily have the full authority of a county administrator. And then we have the remaining counties. And I think this map I need to update again because it says there's 19 counties, but we've seen a few changes recently. So again, don't hold me to any numbers included on this map because again, another county today just created an ad hoc committee to look to move toward a county administrator. So these numbers are ever changing. But again, sometimes we have counties that have, folks that have a dual role, meaning they have the title of administrative coordinator, but they have another job within the county as well. So for example, there are 8 counties where the county clerk also serves as the administrative coordinator. 4 counties have their board chair serving as the administrative coordinator. I don't recommend that simply because there's an attorney general's opinion that says that the positions of county board chair and administrative coordinator are incompatible. But still, we have 4 counties that choose to structure themselves in that manner. We have a few counties that have the human resources director, one that has the finance director. There's one human services director and one highway commissioner that also serve as the administrative coordinator for their particular county. Now, I will tell you in the case of the human services director, he will tell you, because I went and gave a presentation to them on the 3 forms of county government because they were looking to make a change. And he made it very clear to everybody in the room, I have that title in name only. I am the official person. I receive the official communications from the state and nothing else. I have no authority over anybody else. And that's typically what these dual position roles tend to look like. And so I think sometimes it makes it a little bit difficult when we want to talk about structure and hierarchy and who's responsible for doing what. Some of these more undefined positions make it a little bit more difficult. And I would say that if we were to talk about trends across the state, I think the trend we've been seeing over the last few years is for counties to get out of these dual role positions and to move toward either a full-time county administrator or a full-time county administrator that might have another duty. For example, yes, they are officially the administrator, but they might have HR director functions as well as part of their job description. But again, there's clearly a trend, and I'm not supposed to have an opinion on this, but I do, so I will share with you. I think that trend is moving in the right direction, which means you here in Marathon County, I think are sitting pretty good right now with the way that you guys have structured yourselves. All right, so a little bit about the county executive. Don't want to spend a lot of time on that. We don't see a lot of counties choosing to move to a county executive position because it takes some of the authority away really from the county board. And so the county executive position it's required for counties that have a population of 750,000 or more, which means Milwaukee County is required to have a county executive. And it is optional for counties that have a population under 750,000. If a county chooses to move in that direction, either the county board can adopt a resolution to move in that direction, or the position can also be created by petition and referendum. So this is, again, an elected position. which means that the county executive is accountable to the electorate, to the citizens of the county. And the board does not have any authority over the county executive, meaning if you have concerns with the county executive, the board does not really have any recourse, and you don't have the ability to remove the county executive. The county executive does appoint and supervise department heads within the county. They also appoint members to boards and commissions. They are required by statute to submit an annual budget to the county board, and the county executive does have veto authority over the actions of the county board. That being said, of course, the county board has then the ability to override the veto of the county executive. The county executive does have very broad veto authority, and it is said that the county executive actually has broader veto authority than the governor of the state of Wisconsin. All right, county administrator. This is the one I'm probably going to spend a little more time on because it's the form of government you guys have here in Marathon County. So county administrator, all the statutory duties, the creation of the position is all found in 5918 of the state statutes. And the county administrator position is an option for counties that have a population of 750,000 or less. This position, again, is created by either by resolution, or I say petition and referendum or resolution of the county board. And the county administrator is appointed by a majority vote of the board. So oftentimes when we talk about the county administrator position, we talk about the county administrator being the sole employee of the county board because you have the ability to appoint that person, which also means you have the ability to relieve that individual of their duties as well. So the county administrative officer, oftentimes seems they're very much like the county executive. While the county executive is the chief executive officer of the county administrator really serves as the chief administrative officer of the county. By statute, they're supposed to, again, take care that every ordinance, state or federal law is observed, enforced, and administered within the county. Now, the duties and powers of the county administrator are listed in 5918 of the statutes. So the county administrator, by statute, coordinates and directs all the administrative and management functions of county government. They appoint and supervise, and they also have the ability to remove department heads unless that is waived, that confirmation is waived by the county board. Now, these other subsets that I put in here, I put in here for a reason, because it really, if you have a county administrator, the statute then defines who has authority over, over that department head, and then what does the role of the county board become when you have a county administrator. So it says in statute that when you have a county administrator who is appointing department heads, the department head then supervises the administration of the department. So it is basically the role of that department head to operate the department on a day-to-day basis. And then where does that leave the county board? Again, according to statute, that means that the county board performs advisory or policy-making functions as authorized by statute. So again, the day-to-day operations rest with the department head. The policy-making function rests with the county board. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit as well. Again, similar to the county executive position, the county administrator appoints members to the boards and commissions, and they submit an annual budget to the board for the board's approval. Now, the statute goes on to list what the qualifications should be for individuals who are going to serve as county administrators. The statute says that you have to appoint the county administrator solely based on merit, but the board should give due regard to training, experience, administrative ability, and the general qualifications and fitness for performing the duties of the office. It then goes on to say that no weight or consideration shall be given by the board to residence, to nationality, or to political or religious affiliations. Again, it is the intention for the county administrator to be nonpartisan in the same manner that county board members are elected on a nonpartisan ballot. The removal of the county administrator is up to the county board. The county board may remove at any time that the county administrator's conduct of the county's administration becomes unsatisfactory, and then the statute says that that action of the board shall be final. And when there is a vacancy on in the county administrator position, it is up to the county board to fill that by a majority vote. All right, now administrative coordinator. Honestly, I don't think you guys would ever go back to administrative coordinator, so I don't think anybody would mind if we skip these next couple of slides here and we'll move on to the role of the county boards of supervisors. So the county board of supervisors, you guys serve primarily in a legislative function. So as a county board member, again, you serve very much like a member of, say, the state legislature or Congress, only you have that policy-making abilities and authorities over those items of which Marathon County government has authority and control. Now, county supervisors, you perform that function in a variety of ways, but you do that primarily through the adoption of resolutions, through the enactment of ordinances. You do this through the adoption of a plan, whether it's a strategic plan, whether it is your comprehensive plan or a land use plans. These are all the different ways in which counties adopt policy. I think a strong argument could be made that probably the biggest policy document that you guys adopt on an annual basis at the county level would be your county budget, because that is where you decide where your priorities lie. More likely than not, you are going to put money toward those items that you believe are a priority, and you're going to put less money into those items that are less of a priority or maybe less of a need for the citizens of your particular county. And again, all of the work that you do is done in a cooperative decision-making process. No operational control over the county rests with any individual supervisor. So again, you guys as a board, you work cooperatively to oversee the operations of the county in terms of setting expectations and desired outcomes. And again, oftentimes you might do that through the adoption of a strategic plan, but you also spend time making sure that the outcomes that the county board desires are being met by your various county departments. Again, your authority as a county supervisor, it's collective rather than individual. So that means that no individual authority really has the authority to act on behalf of the board unless you are specifically authorized by the full board to do so. If you take a look at the state statutes, again, Chapter 59, 5951, 5952 talks about the authority of the county. It talks about a lot of the permissive authorities that are provided to the county. Nowhere in Chapter 59 does it say an individual county supervisor shall or an individual county supervisor may. Instead, it says the board shall or the board may undertake these particular functions, again, recognizing that the board acts as a collective. The last point I think I want to make on this particular slide here is that the term supervisor. Sometimes county officials think the term supervisor means that you have the ability and the authority to supervise all of the functions that go on in county government. The reality is the term supervisor is really a historical term. It is not really a functional term. The term county board supervisor goes back to the pre-statehood days when Wisconsin was part of a territory. There was two different forms of county government that were included, that were within the territory. There was the New York model, which was the county supervisor model, and then there was the Pennsylvania model, which was county commissions. I will tell you that county commissioners perform very different functions than county supervisors do. So if any of you are ever in some neighboring states, or if any of you go out to a NACO conference and you encounter somebody who has the term of county, or has the title, I should say, of county commissioner, those county commissioners have a very different function than what we have. County commissioners really more so, they're more involved in more oversight and more operations than opposed to the county supervisor form of government, where supervisors, we make policy as a member of a county board. So again, those are very different. And sometimes the name is actually very, very confusing to us. All right, so again, just to recap this very quickly, when we talk about the primary duties of the county board, I would say there are twofold. The first is you adopt policy, and the second is that you hold staff accountable for implementing the policy, and you do that through your county administration. Now, there's one word we like to talk about when we talk about county supervisors in your role, and that is the term visionary. Now, how many of you guys go home and somebody says, "Wow, you are such a visionary"? How many of your constituents call you up and say, "Thank you so much for being the visionary that you are"? Constituents call you to thank you for being a visionary? Usually not? No? But that's really like, when we give this presentation, we really talk about your role as a visionary being probably one of the most important things that you guys do as a member of the county board. So as a member of the county board, we don't want you to think about the day-to-day operations of the county. That's for Lance and his staff to deal with. What we want you guys to think about is we want you to think big. You guys need to be big thinkers. We want you guys to think long term. We want you to think strategically. We don't want you to think about what is this department or what is the county going to do tomorrow. Instead, we want you guys to think about what should the county board be looking like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And think about how is it that we can get the county there moving forward. So again, a lot of this is probably one of the most important roles that you guys play. And I think it is the most underappreciated thing that you guys do, because people don't understand that it is really your job to make sure that the county is in a better position, not only 2 years from now when you run for election again, but 20 years from now. That is such a critical function that I don't think gets talked about enough. All right, so again, your county board functions. Obviously, there are lots of things that you do that are perfunctory. You come to your meetings. Glad you're all here tonight. That's one of the important things that you guys do. You vote on issues. That's another important thing that you guys do as a county board member. You participate in your debate. You participate in your discussion. You determine what services are going to be provided at the county level. You adopt a budget. You're required to levy taxes every year. But your primary function is to enact policy. But at this point, I would just want to stop for a minute and talk about this first line item here that says involve, represent, and be accountable to the public. And what does that really mean? And how you react when you have these encounters with members of the public, I think is critical, not only from a standpoint of wanting to be responsive, but at the same time, it may keep your county out of trouble and avoid some liability issues if you guys respond to the public in the right way. And I think probably the easiest way to talk about this might be through some examples. So let's say you get a call from a constituent, and a constituent is mad because they have a pothole in front of their driveway, and they live on a county trunk highway. So what do you do as a county board supervisor? Are you going to get a wheelbarrow and some hot mix and a shovel and a tamper or whatever is used? I hope the highway commissioner isn't here because I really have no idea how one fills a pothole. But is it your job as a county board supervisor to go out and fill that pothole? Of course not, right? You're not going to fill that pothole. Instead, what are you going to do? You're going to give your county administrator a call. Or depending upon county policy, you may call your county highway commissioner and you may let them know that his constituent called and they were upset because there's this big pothole. Can you go out, take a look at it? Let me know if you can get this resolved for my constituent and please take care of the issue. Now let's say the constituent calls and it's not a pothole. Let's say the constituent calls because they had a negative interaction with a county staff member. Maybe it was because they didn't qualify for a particular program or service that they hoped to qualify for. What do you do then? You have an angry constituent. Are you going to run into that department and start investigating the complaint on that employee? I hope not. And you guys are looking at me with this funny look on your face right now. But would this be an example had it not happened in 1 or 2 counties across the state? Okay? That's why I tell the story, because there are supervisors that have gone in and started their own investigations at various levels within the departments. That is not your role. This is why you hire a county administrator. When you get those calls, you thank the constituent for letting you know. I ask that you don't agree with the constituent because, again, you don't have the full story. Usually when somebody is calling to complain, they may not be providing you with the full facts. It's the same as when your kids are fighting, right? And one of them's going to come to you and tell you that the other one did something wrong, forgetting to tell you, oh yeah, I started it because I pulled their hair first. So again, a lot of the times we don't always get the full story. So again, we ask that you not agree with these constituents. They may very well be right, but they also may very well not be. And so we just ask that you, again, make sure you understand what your county's complaint procedure is. and know who it is that you should go to and who with these particular complaints, and then allow county administration to address those particular issues. And I think it is exceedingly important, again, because especially when we're talking about personnel matters, if we start investigating, if we start entering into conversations, you could put the county at risk for some, if something is done incorrectly. All right, so this is a sample county board rule. This actually comes from the Chippewa County Board. I'm not going to read this statement to you tonight. You guys can certainly read it on your own time. But the reason I put it in this particular presentation is because I think it really clearly and succinctly, in a few sentences, really sums up what we have talked about to date with regard to what is the role of the county administrator versus the role of the county board. And, I highly encourage counties to include a statement like this within your county board rules so that it is very clear to every member of the county board, hey, this is our role, these are our responsibilities, this is the role of the county administration. So again, something like that is always good in your county board rules as a nice reminder. All right, let's talk a little bit about the county board chair. So 5912 of the state statutes really defines what the role is of the county board chair. There's generally three things that are listed in 5912. It says that the county board chair presides over meetings of the county board of supervisors. It says that the county board chair administers oaths and countersigns all ordinances. But we all know that there's a lot more things that the county board chair does. Whether it's, related to agenda setting and posting of notices legally under the open meetings law. But there's also things as well that are contained in Robert's Rules of Order that talk about the role of the chair. These types of things include, acting as the spokesperson for the county board, providing guidance and direction on moving issues through the board, maintaining decorum during county board meetings. And again, every time I give this presentation as well, I like to remind everybody that it is not easy to sit in the seat of and being the county board chair. And so, it is the job of the county board chair to, make sure that decorum is followed, that the rules of the county board are being followed by every member of the county board. And so if the county board chair has to use their gavel for some reason, it's okay that they're using the gavel. Somebody should not be mad. County board chairs are merely doing their jobs when they're gaveling down individuals who may not be following the rules of the board. I also ask members of the county board to respect the job that you have entrusted your county board chair with, to making sure that the rules are being followed and adhered to, and not to get upset if a county board chair says, wait a minute, I need to check on this. I'm not certain we're following the rules, appropriately. Again, that's the role of the county board chair. All right, standing committees. Let's talk a little bit about standing committees, because in the state of Wisconsin, we really operate through the use of a strong committee structure. Most of the heavy lifting when it comes to resolutions and ordinances are done by committees. It is the committees that, generally where that resolution or ordinance, when it first gets introduced, is going to be referred to a committee. It is that committee that is going to study the issue, that is going to become expert on that particular issue. And it is that committee that is going to ultimately make a recommendation to the full county board. And if we really truly believe in the strong committee structure, how long should our county board meetings last? If we believe that our fellow county board members who sat in these committees did their homework and did their job properly, how long should our meetings last? Not very long? You want 15 minutes?
We beat it already.
You beat it already. Good. Good. Then I guess we don't have to belabor this point, do we? Again, trust in your committee structure. Again, this is just a lot of repeat about the committees are structured to do a lot of preliminary work, to make recommendations. It is also the role of the committee to make sure that that the outcomes are being met by the various county departments as well. So you do have, as a committee, not only making those recommendations, but you do have some oversight authority as well over the departments to make sure that the strategic direction that you set for particular programs or that particular department is being met. All right, staff. Staff have an obligation to carry out the duties in a manner that is consistent with the policy direction of the board. Staff makes recommendations. Staff makes professional advice. Another way to say this, it is a staff's job and staff's role to make you guys as county board members look good. But again, staff, they don't really have the authority to make policy. other than sometimes internal policy. And again, that's only as authorized by the board or by the administration. All right, administration and department heads. Again, we asked you guys as county board members to be visionaries, to think about things in the long term. Staff is really the opposite of that. We ask your staff to think about things in the short term. We ask your staff to really, dig into the weeds and work, and manage the day-to-day operations of different programs, of different departments within county government. Their jobs as staff, it requires a lot of attention to detail. Oftentimes your staff has to have specialized training to carry out the functions that they are being tasked with performing. And this is where we get to the slide that sometimes gets us in trouble. So, when you guys are hiring staff at the county level, what do you look for in your staff? Just shout it out. We're going to be interactive here. What do you guys look for when you hire staff?
Reliable.
Someone who's reliable? Someone who has experience? Education is important, absolutely. Right? These are a lot of things that we look for when we hire staff. Do they belong to the right professional associations? Are they up to date on their credentialing? All of these are things that you look for when you hire your county staff. Now let's think about, what were the qualifications that you guys needed to run for the county board? I was going to say, the clerk is laughing. Excuse me. Okay, so you had to be 18, right? You have to live in your district, and you cannot be a felon. Now look at those qualifications compared to those that we ask of our staff. Now, I am not at all suggesting here that we don't have county board members that aren't educated, that aren't smart, that aren't reliable, that aren't professional, because you guys are all of those things. However, we ask you guys have different qualifications because we ask you to do very different things. They have to know all the child welfare regulations, in order to perform their child welfare services. Your social workers have to get credentialed and understand lots of different things. You as a board member, you don't need the credentialing, but you can say these are the programs we would like you to operate. As a board member too, one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is, again, you guys have a close connection with the electorate. You have a close connection with the citizens, with the individuals that you represent. And that, again, we can't stress the importance of that, because it is from those interactions that you guys have with members of the citizenry, with the electorate, that helps you perform your function in determining what are the needs of the citizens of Marathon County, and then you take what you learn from your interactions with your constituents, with the citizens, to begin to structure and to create that strategic plan or that long-term visioning that you guys are supposed to be doing as members of the board. So again, that's a very different role than what it is we are asking your county staff to do. All right. So again, as the county board, you're more than likely going to be asking yourself the what and why, and your staff and the administration are really going to be asking the questions of where, when, and how. All right. This is where I'm going to skip, because I'm looking at the time. So where I'm going to skip some slides here. Let's see. Yeah, this is the slide where we talk about do not micromanage or stay in your lane. There's actually a county board that has in its county board rules, county board members shall not micromanage departments. I mean, I've heard people like me, we talk around it. I've seen one county board that actually put that within their county board rules. All right, we'll skip that particular court case as well. So again, what happens if we don't have a distinction between policy setting, the board, and administration or staff? If we don't have that distinction, you as a board are going to spend a lot of time on the trivial. You are going to be spending an awful lot of time reading reams of documents, hopefully before you could come to a meeting. But again, you're going to, if you're going to, start getting into the administrative realm, you guys are going to have to become experts on every single program within the county. And again, we know you guys don't have the time in which to do that. You're going to have long-running meetings that accomplish little. You guys are going to be reactive instead of proactive. Again, because you guys are visionaries. We want you guys to be proactive and thinking about the things you want to do, not always reacting to things that are going to be happening. So let's move on here to, I'm just going to skip this executive chart and go right on to the chart with county administrators and county administration. What I like about the county administrator structure is it is really clean. It is really crisp. This is probably the most linear of all of the charts that we have. And it is very clear that county staff, reports to department heads who report to the county administrator, who then reports to the county board. So it's really easy to see here, kind of what your structure is within a county that has a county administrator. So it is clear if there is a concern, if there is an issue, if something pops up, if there is a problem, you can look at the chart and say, okay, this is who I report to, this is who I need to talk to about a particular issue. Now, there is one group of folks in the county family, you can see with an administrative coordinator, not quite as clear. But there's one group of folks we have not talked about yet in the county family. And who might those folks be? They are your county constitutional officers. So your clerk of court, your sheriff, your treasurer, your register of deeds, your clerk. You have a medical examiner, right? And you don't have an elected surveyor? All right. So these are. But the DA is not a county employee, so, we can argue DA, maybe not. But, for our sake today, we are going to exclude the DA from this conversation. So the constitutional officers are really what we define as having a dual persona. And the reason we do that is because, very much like a county executive, they are elected by the constituency, which means they are accountable to whom? The electorate. They're not really accountable to the county board, are they? Because they are independently elected positions. Now, that being said, where do they get the money from? Who do they get the money from to run their departments? They come to the county board for that. Who works in their offices? County employees, right? So they have a dual persona in the sense that, yes, they are independently elected, but county constitutional officers really have to work within the county structure. And I would say for the most part, in my almost 33 years of working with WCA, county boards and the county constitutional officers tend to get along pretty well. County constitutional officers, I don't see them holding over the heads of the county boards. Hey, I'm independently elected. You have to do this for me. No, I don't see that. All the county constitutional officers I have worked with and am aware of really desire to have a good working relationship with the county board. They want to make sure they are doing things efficiently. They want to make sure that they are providing good service to the citizens. They want to make sure that they are providing that good service to the citizens at a cost that fits within the county budget structure. So again, you don't have really oversight and control over the county constitutional officers, but they also desire to want to work with you as members of the governing body. So again, to end this presentation, we have working together as a goal, or as Andy Phillips sometimes talks about, he calls these next set of slides achieving harmony. And how we do that. And again, between board members of the administrative team, know your job. Try not to interfere with that of the administration. Devote the time needed to do a good job. Read the background materials the administration prepares. Don't be the person that, again, you guys, everyone has computers now, so the example isn't as fun as it used to be. When you used to walk into meetings, and I used to see this on the WCA board, where somebody would walk into a meeting and open up their envelope for the first time once they sat down at the meeting. I don't think that is called being prepared for your meeting. Again, it's okay to admit what you don't know. Ask a lot of questions. That's what the staff is here for. Do not jump to conclusions. Instead, hear and weigh all the facts. Don't make promises outside of board meetings, not only for legal reasons, but also out of respect for the ethics of the situation and regard for the other board members, the administration, and employees. Listen to what your constitutional officers and employees have to offer and let them know you are listening. Again, we already talked about knowing your county's complaint process. Staff has an obligation to remain politically neutral. They should never take a position based on politics. Again, understand that when your supervisors or when your department heads are providing you with information, they are providing you with the best information and the facts that they have available to them. If you get the answer if you don't get the answer that you were looking for, it is not because they are choosing to take a side. Rather, they're telling you what the facts are and what you need to know. Again, the key points to remember, I'm going to skip it because a lot of this is what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So with that, I think I'm going to end here because I'm probably going to be out of time. And I know I saw your agenda. I know you have a lot of things on there yet today to discuss, and just see if anybody has any questions.
We'll open it up to the board for questions. Any questions?
They're going to make this one easy on me.
Yeah, I guess you've done such a good job. You've either put them all to sleep or you give them all the information.
Or they've all heard it before and they asked me all the questions 2 years ago when I was here. One of the two.
So I want to express my sincere thank you to Sarah for coming to Marathon County and providing us that educational session, and thank her again for all of her efforts.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And again, if you do have questions later on, my contact information is included in the PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to reach out at any time. And as I tell everybody, I'm on the road a lot, so don't hesitate to use my cell phone if you need to call me and ask a question. That is totally fine. And any time of day or night's okay too. I answer it on the weekends as well. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll move on to item B9, Budget 101, HR Finance Committee Chair Robinson. Mr. Supervisor Robinson, please.
And Administrator Leonard, I just want to point out that Marathon County did an elaborate study on the size of the county board, and we are the largest county board in the country. We are second to the Albany County Legislature in Albany, New York, which is
39.
39 members. So at one time, we were also 39 members, well, 72 at one time, but the state law changed. But Administrator Leonard will be joining me tonight in the presentation. What we wanted to do is just give you a very high-level 4-hour presentation on the budget process, and we're going. That 4-hour presentation has actually been recorded for your gratification. So we put the links in the packet. Last year we went through a very elaborate process of trying to explain Budget 101 and the nuances of it. And please go to those. They're still very relevant to what we're doing today. And I would also direct you to the 2024 budget message prepared by the administrator.
So building on what HR Finance and Property Committee Chair Robinson referenced, you're going to get a very quick, high-level overview today. Those trainings that were put on last year, I do encourage you to look at. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt. But really, it was undertaken after our preceding year's budget process, this idea that we really want to dive into it and improve the process from the perspective of supervisors to do more of what Sarah said, which is really be able to have a true impact on the budget, understand where your opportunities are to be that visionary and direct spending, because as I would agree wholeheartedly with Sarah's comment that the budget, at least from my perspective, is the most important policy document you adopt on an annual basis. So high level, just some terms. You're going to hear operating versus capital budget, and you'll certainly see that in the budget timeline that Supervisor Robinson is going to reference later in the presentation. Simple way to look at it from the budgeting standpoint. The operating budget is the funds that are allocated to make things happen in terms of wages, benefits, whether we do it directly through our own staff or we contract for staff. Like Sarah referenced, kind of from the administration perspective, we often look at how things are being done. Do we hire people to do it, assign it to already existing staff, or do we contract that work out? The funding streams are listed there, but generally speaking, they're laid out in the budget. Capital is more of those tangible pieces. Now, I want to say again, that doesn't mean that we have two separate budgets or that capital expenditures can't be funded within the annual budget or within an operating budget. That is absolutely not the case, as you see when you look at the funding streams for capital. But the distinction is important. When you think about people, operating budget. When you think about stuff, generally think capital. So our capital budget, we're trying to really enhance that, just as we referenced before with the overall budget process. We're really looking to be much more visionary. Again, the direction of the county board about some of the capital projects you've seen over the last several years about consolidating our footprint through facility renovations. But in terms of funding streams, as I said, you can pay with those things like pay as you go. Again, budget on an annual basis. And you can use operating funds to do that. Marathon County, as the second bullet there suggests under funding streams, we have a very specific rollover policy that calls for any unspent funds from a budget year to, in the year following the audit, be rolled over for capital. There are a lot of reasons for that. Won't get into them at this point. You can watch the previous presentation, but there are actually a number of counties now that have adopted that very same approach, including St. Croix County, who we basically stole their budget process from them relatively recently. So, and then the last part I'll reference is debt. You can borrow for capital projects. Under Wisconsin statute, that is one of the very limited exceptions to the levy limits, which we'll talk about later. And good news, should you ever need to do that, you haven't borrowed for the last, I believe, the last 2 years. But you have a very strong bond rating. In fact, the highest bond rating you can have for based on the size of government you are. I think this is me as well. I won't go into these. This is just a general overview of kind of where your money goes. You'll see a significant amount goes to general government. The way I like to think about that is generally stuff that happens in this building. Public safety is a significant expenditure, as is social services, and transportation being the highway department. You'll get a better sense of both the budget and revenues in the slide that Chair Robinson is going to go over with respect to the kind of historical expenditures within departments. In terms of revenues, this is an important thing, and I think it's consistent probably with your anecdotal experience that the thing you hear most often from constituents, as Sarah referenced, I'm guessing probably when tax bills go out, you get more phone calls, or when we talk about budget. Taxes are not the majority of the funding that we receive. You'll see that taxes make up a plurality. However, they're the largest single source. And within that taxes component is not only property taxes, which we're all very familiar with, but also the vehicle registration fee is included in there, as well as sales tax. So Wisconsin, for just a frame of reference, perhaps the most property tax reliant state in terms of counties within that state in the country. So we rely on property taxes, as you all know, very, very much here in the state of Wisconsin as county governments.
So we borrowed this slide from the presentation last year in the top 10 budgeted expenses versus budget levy to give you an understanding that not all dollars are the same. So if you cut $1 thinking you're going to cut the levy $1, it isn't necessarily how it works. And when you look at the highway department, in 2023, they had a $40+ million budget. Last year it was $34 million. We actually had a decrease in the overall budget between 2023 and 2024. Part of that was we were capturing a lot of federal grants for highway projects and Highway K reconstruction and other things. So we lowered it. But social services, insurance is a large component, the sheriff's department, and all of them have different impacts on the levy. And the number one is the sheriff's department. Highway is number two, but only about 25% of the highway department levy or expenses go to the levy. And it's sort of self-explanatory, and we'll leave it to you. But I'll leave it to Administrator Leonard to talk about how we get the levy.
Sure. So property tax levy, just a couple bullet points here, value-based revenue stream. So what does that mean? That means if we're comparing ourselves and you have I own a $150,000 valued piece of property and you owe a $300,000 valued piece of property, all other things being equal, which very rarely are they, but all other things being equal, because the values are different, you're going to pay a higher tax. And that's sometimes difficult to, certainly I've had conversations with individuals that call me, and I'm sure you all will have, or you've already had them. That's a difficult thing to understand as we talk about increased valuation, right? People's property growing in value because I live in the city of Wausau and I recently received my assessment. I checked my bank account. It did not grow in the same form and fashion. So it's not, that's important though to realize it's different than income tax, right? We all understand when we pay income taxes, you are getting more, you're holding more in your hand or in your bank account, and you're also having more taken through tax. Property tax is different, but it is that value-based revenue stream. It's why WCA, and I know Sarah already is heading for Green Bay, but they have been very active, for those of you that have been in WCA for a while, talking about that. And is that the way Wisconsin wants to be positioned for the long term, is to be so reliant on property tax? So just that idea of value-based revenue stream. The second is equalized value and assessed value. There's a really great article from, it used to be the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance, I think, Wisconsin Policy Forum. I will endeavor to send it out, talking about the difference between equalized value and assessed value. I'll start with the latter one because I think it's the one people understand better. And we go into this a lot more in the recording, so please go back to it if you have any questions. But assessed value is the value, if you think about an assessor in your municipality, they go around and they're going to say, okay, this piece of property is worth X because of market factors. They're looking at the improvements you may have made. All those things about the property, it's individually within a municipality being assessed. Equalized value is different in that it is something set by DOR, the Department of Revenue, on an annual basis. The county doesn't set it, the municipalities don't set it. But why that's important is because we, the county, apportions tax, that is, the tax the municipalities have to pay in, what we apportion out, what we require from them based on equalized value. The idea is that across the state of Wisconsin and certainly across counties, if your municipality has just gone through an assessment, a reassessment, a revaluation, and across the street is the dividing line and your neighbor lives in another municipality that hasn't, those assessed values might be different, but the idea of equalized value is that it gets around that. So DOR does their best to hand out, to set equalized values, and we get those later in the year and we'll report them to you because they're really important. But it's important to remember if people get, oh, I have a new assessment, my assessment went up 20%, 25%, my taxes are going to go up 25%. That is not necessarily the case. So I'll send out that article from the Policy Forum, but the way to think about it, and I think we have a slide on this, remember that property tax levy is a number. Let's just say it's, in a municipality, the levy is $10 million. If everyone's value increases, their assessed value on their house goes up, but our levy, the amount of money that is being levied to deliver services doesn't change, all that happens is your rate is going to go down. And that's another idea that'll be communicated in that presentation if you watch it. Wisconsin has had and still continues to have perhaps the most strict levy limits in the country. So as valuation increases, by a function of math, the levy rate is going down. And what our levy rate can increase is, again, limited by statute, which we won't get into details here, but it's essentially net new construction. That's why when we get into budget time, HR Finance, the committee is going to talk a lot about, hey, what's our net new construction number? And Marathon County has, as John will show last year, we've had, thankfully, knock on wood, some really good net new construction numbers because that allows the levy to grow a little bit. Other counties don't have that. And why might you say, oh, that's not good that we're levying more tax? Think of net new construction as new payers. People moving to your community, building new homes. They are new people coming in that allows us to grow the levy a little bit, but also spread out the already existing levy across those new individuals as well. So levy rate, the last thing I'll say, that's really one of the ways, the primary way that we report our property tax. And it's an average levy rate. going back to the first or the second thing that I talked about, the difference between equalized value and assessed, I hesitate to bet, but whatever we our average levy rate is that we report in the budget message, I'm not sure if any municipality actually has that as their levy rate, but it's the average levy rate based on equalized value. That's what we report in the budget. That's what we track historically, and that's the thing that I was talking about that continues to get driven down by a function of levy limits. But you can see historically, and I don't know if John will talk about it, but levy limits, the levy rate has continued to be driven down, and the new money that we've been able to bring in through net new construction has lagged inflation. So that's why when we talk about your most important budget or your most important policy document being your budget, that's because resources are always a finite thing. So anything else you wanted on that?
Well, I think we're covering
Okay.
the,
Oh, there we go.
so the levy limits are basically, we keep throwing out the term net new construction. We can grow the levy by the increase due to new construction, less improvements, and that's impacted by TIF, tax increment finance districts and other things. But the current levy is $57,954,347. That can only go up by the net new construction with a couple of exceptions. Culverts and bridges, which is a separate item outside, and then debt service. Debt service that has been approved by 3/4 vote of the county board. And library operations. Just put it in perspective, this is from the Department of Revenue. You can see that the county's increase last year is 2.32%. Not every community is the same. Village of Unity, the portion that's in Marathon County had a 0.47% increase. Croninwater the village had a 1.19%. So while there are differences, while the county may be 2.32, Schofield had a 7% increase. So it impacts different communities differently, but that's how they can increase their levy. The budget timeline, we are in the throes of developing the budget. We're giving the educational presentation. Later tonight, we will be adopting budget priorities, and we'll spend some time talking about that. And then the administrator will share those priorities with the departments in starting that. We're asking in July that the committees review the programs and make recommendations. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we'll also, from the Human Resources and Finance Committee, be bringing in budget assumptions. And again, we'll cover that a little bit later. Once we do that, the administrator will then sit down in earnest with the departments and say that these are the assumptions that we'll be operating under. Please submit to him their preliminary request, and he'll sort through those during August, September, spending time with them. In October, and I think we've got that slated for October 9th, he'll be presenting the budget to the county board. The Human Resources Finance Property Committee will look at it, make some changes, and then authorize it for publication. We'll accept it. At that point, it no longer is the administrator's budget, it is the county board's budget. We'll publish it in the paper, providing the legal notice under the state statutes. The committees will also have an opportunity to review the budget and proposed modifications, and then that will go out to the public. We will then have a public hearing either on Halloween or early in November, and consider amendments, and then ultimately the county board will adopt the budget. So tonight, you're being asked to deal with the budget priorities. Those basically are saying we're not going to use our capital reserves or fund balances to balance the budget. Employee compensation, we want to be competitive, yet we are in a fiscally constrained environment, so we're looking at a maximum of 3%. We're looking at potentially looking at alternative delivery mechanisms for health insurance and to control costs, and also benefit design and employee contributions. Operating expenses, we're looking at trying to maximize efficiencies in service delivery. And new positions, The priorities are saying no new positions unless they're funded by an outside source off of the levy. One of the components in the budget is a capital improvement program, and in your packet for tonight, there was a very, very preliminary capital improvement plan. We are trying to get into a legitimate 5-year capital plan so we can do a better job of forecasting and placing projects in a sequence where we can maximize debt service reduction and other things. So the county administrator has reviewed and they've submitted a preliminary plan in August. You'll review that priority list, giving preliminary approval, and then it will be up to administration to figure out how to pay for it. In the past, we've used ARPA dollars, we've used fund balance, we've used other sources. And then ultimately, you'll approve the capital improvement plan as part of the 2025 budget. So next month, we will be looking at what are the assumptions that will go into building the budget. We'll sit down with the finance director and look at what are the projected net new construction numbers looking like, how much will we have to spend, where will we be relative to shared revenues, the money that comes from the state of Wisconsin. And we'll spend some time on each of these. Where will we be with general transportation aid from the state? What are our sales tax collections looking like? And what sort of public charges will we have? What sort of fees are we charging? We'll look at expenses, salaries, new positions, if there are any, and we've sort of said no. What our costs are, what utilities are. Put in perspective, the Federal Reserve is indicated that the current inflation rate is 2.4%. Last year was 6+%. I think that might be understated, but we'll be looking at that and bringing that in. So, do you want to handle this one because you're
Sure. So as I referenced before, sales tax is certainly a substantial component of our budget. You'll see that this really dovetails nicely with that policy that I referenced before relative to capital. Marathon County has a long-standing history of being very conservative in their projections relative to sales tax. This predates me considerably, but I'll give you my 2-cent explanation. It's a lot easier to have money roll over into capital to reduce your need or eliminate your need to borrow for capital expenditures next year than it is to budget aggressively, have a downturn in the economy, and figure out what you're going to cut. The second one is painful. The first one is kind of fun. You get to figure out what projects you're gonna move forward, and you don't have to worry about how to borrow. You'll see this is just a table showing the collections. We have, however, narrowed that gap of between what our projections are and where we actually have been coming in. And again, that's a function of just the growing competing resources for funds. Currently, I've been presenting. I presented once already on sales tax projections through this year. They're available on the Department of Revenue webpage if you ever are looking and wondering, hey, where does Marathon County sit currently? They have a little bit of a lag, but I anticipate we'll probably have another update to HR Finance next month relative to sales tax. Anything else you want to know?
shared revenue is the payments that we receive from the state. And over the years, certain types of property have been taken off of the property tax and, machinery, equipment, other things. And the state tried to share in the growth of the state's economy through the shared revenue program. But as you note, from 2015 to 2023, there was no increase in the aidable formula portion. The only area where we received an increase was in the utility property. That's basically associated with the Weston power plants. We receive a supplemental payment for that. So we saw an incremental, very slight increase over the last 10 years until last year when the legislature and the governor agreed on taking a portion of the sales tax, 1%, and applying it to the shared revenue program. I think it amounted to $256 million for local government. So we saw an increase for the first time in years. And that helped us deal with some potentially tough budgets. The other area that we receive state aids is general transportation aids. Basically, our highway, for our highway, those portions of the costs that are aidable are go into a formula. We take 6 years of spending, and the state highway transportation aids are distributed on a formula based upon how we rank relative to other counties. It was the practice of the county that when all of a sudden we'd be developing the budget, we'd see a decrease in transportation aids, and we'd cut our budget to reflect that decrease in transportation aids. And we said, wait a minute, we're sort of in this self-fulfilling spiral down. You know, we shouldn't be cutting the budget, but we should be raising it because everybody else is spending a little bit more if we want to capture transportation aids. The commitment is they should be funding roads at 30%. I think they're at 19, low 19%. So as a result, we're not keeping pace with inflation, but it is important to remember that that's a 6-year county-supported expenditures. It excludes grants, and that's what goes into that.
Just to clarify, so when Supervisor Robinson was referencing the kind of the past practice of, okay, we have a tough budget, or our state aidable revenue for highways came in lower, the budget he was talking about cutting was the transportation or highway budget. So that's that, you know, it's a function of if everyone else spends more money next year and Marathon County spends the same, we will get less based on that formula for those 6 years, because it's a 6-year rolling average. So if you look back at past budgets, we had a year, I want to say it was, right, and you can see the jump up in 2018. We had a couple of big years with big projects that caused our formula. We got a benefit across when compared to other neighbors because we spent, Marathon County invested, I should say, a lot more in infrastructure. But just wanted to clarify, it's not that the county board cut the overall budget because you really want to maximize operating, but what specific part of the budget we used to balance it in the past had occasionally been that highway department budget.
So Administrator Leonard had talked about tax levy versus rate, and this reflects that. You can see that we've had levy increases, and a significant portion of the increase between 2023 and 24 was 1.6 million in debt service that went on. But our tax rate is down. So we've gone from 516 down to 399. While people's value has increased, so there will be a corresponding increase in taxes. But the levy has gone up, but the tax rate has been coming down. That's that levy restraint or levy limit or capital expenditure limit. So what is your, the role of the standing committees? You have in your packet some information relative to the budget, but we're asking each of the committees to review programs within the scope of the committee's authority to look at the various mandated versus discretionary programs and prioritize them, both in July and October, to provide input to the administrator in the development of the budget and to respond to the budget once he gives it. We're asking that committees also look at those nonprofits that are under their jurisdiction. And those nonprofits include United Way 211, McDevco, Historical Society, North Central Community Action Program, Women's Community, and Judicare mediation programs. And just to make sure that we continue to support those, we have contracts, performance-based contracts. The administrator has done a very good job of having those people receiving the money develop a plan with performance objectives in there. And we also ask that you look at public charges. What are we charging for fees for our parks, for the health department, for various agencies that have the ability to do those? And if you're interested in activities outside of your committee, please attend those committee meetings and provide input in there. And again, not all spending is the same. You can cut significantly from social services, but many of those programs are mandated, and there's not a lot of levy support that goes with them. And it's important that you understand that. You want to just talk about what you went into?
Sure. So the document that Supervisor Robinson referenced about the mandated and discretionary document, that was again something that we put together and refreshed last year as part of that overall budget revamp process, and we borrowed that as well from St. Croix in terms of format. But it's really to help you. It is certainly not a deep in the weeds explanation of those programs, but it's to help facilitate a conversation, as Supervisor Robinson referenced, at those standing committees. And I think certainly it's been my experience based on the conversations that I've seen at standing committees, and if you have questions, please reach out. There are a lot of programs we deliver. Certainly a lot of things are mandated, but there are a lot of things that are purely discretionary that you as supervisors, I think when we look at it, it's if there were some true piece of, hey, this is entirely unnecessary and it costs a lot of money, I think that's been found a great many terms ago, but there are a lot of things that people really enjoy. We just were at HR Finance before this meeting and talking about parks. Parks are entirely discretionary. Your solid waste department has a lot of legal rules around it once you decide to have a solid waste department. It's very heavily regulated, but it's entirely discretionary. You don't need to have one. So if you do have any questions when you look at that document, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I can either give you the answer or put you in contact with whoever you need to speak with. But this is, again, one of those things that, in light of the budget a couple of years ago, it would be helpful to put together this document, and we did update it this year. I worked with the department heads to make sure we captured any changes or worded things perhaps a little bit more accurately. So it is in this packet. It will be in all of the standing committee packets, as Chair Robinson referenced, that then we'll be able to hopefully engage the committees in a way that you find to be, well, more engaging and more meaningful relative to the program discussions that were alluded to before. And this is just an example of, we talk about policy questions for the board. It's what programs or services do you offer at what level, and the last one is at what cost. This is really the last part, what cost. The idea that, and some of our fees are set by the state, but where you have flexibility to institute public charges, you certainly have the freedom to do that. I referenced two already. I'll use those again. Parks and solid waste both have various things that we don't charge a fee for at both departments, solid waste and at parks. And then we have areas where, if you go there, there's a tipping fee, and you are charged to drop off certain items. Parks, you have certain fees you have to pay for certain activities within certain areas of our park system or our forest system. So the idea, again, of at what cost, at what level are you seeking user fees is a good example, or a way I would phrase that. All those things are ways I hope we can, as staff, bring those issues before you. And then again, it's that those are the policy issues for the full board, or at least the standing committee of jurisdiction. Is that all?
That's it.
Okay, that was a lot. If you if you do watch those videos on YouTube, I'll make a suggestion: watch them at 1.25 speed or higher. You'll save some time. Sound a little bit different, but you get time back.
Okay, open it up for questions. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Supervisor Robinson. We'll move on to education presentations and/or reports, standing committee chairpersons or designees. Any standing committee chairpersons or designees have any reports to the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to items C, consent agenda items C11 through item C16B. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Zhang and seconded by Supervisor Drabek. Any discussion on items C11 through C16B1? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. Supervisor Unger and Supervisor Hart. Opal, excuse me. Oh, okay. Okay, Supervisor Opal, are you online? Okay, well then we'll mark my excuse. All right, we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to item D, ordinances. Environmental Resources Committee, the Farmland Preservation Update. Item D17. First, I need a motion by Supervisor Robinson, second by Supervisor Ritter. Supervisor Sandulski, please.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I'd like to say I am 100% in favor of preserving and protecting the farmland. My grandpa was a farmer. I also have a brother-in-law that currently farms and several friends who also farm. Just like Supervisor Langenhahn spoke about it in our Thursday educational meeting, if we don't preserve and protect our farmland, we will have no food. By far right now, I see the largest current threat to the destruction of our farmland is industrial wind and solar. I have an article right here if anybody would like to read it too about the 9,500 acre Vista Sands solar complex that is being built in the towns of Plover and Grant in Portage County. Currently, they have applied for permits. If this all goes through, that will be a loss of 9,500 acres of prime fertile farmland. As I read through the farmland preservation documents, I may have missed it, but if not, I have found very little documentation about this very important matter to preserve and protect the farmland. If it is not clear and concise to the farmland preservation document that anyone who signs over their land to the industrial wind and solar is not eligible, I cannot support it as it stands. It would not be fair to the farmers who are truly preserving the farmland by not signing their land over to industrial wind and solar. If this committee would be willing to take it back and make some of these very important changes, I would also be in favor of that. As it stands, I have to look out for the future, the citizens I serve, and the food supply for our county and for the farmland preservation for future generations. So I cannot support this as it stands. Therefore, there are much better, clean, green, effective energy power plants, which are much more reliable. Example like micro and modular nuclear plants, which produce about the same amount of electricity as 3,500 acres of solar panels. These type of nuclear plants are built on about 20 acres, therefore preserving prime fertile farmland. I also have an article related to that stuff if anybody is interested in that. Thank you very much.
Other discussion? Supervisor Langenhahn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just speak for a second about what the intent or what the purpose of the Farmland Preservation Plan is. As was noted last Thursday, there was some discussion about addressing the possibility of having wind projects in the western part of Marathon County. And the plan actually does touch on that, I think on page 32, very briefly as a possibility and not a certainty. The real purpose of this plan is to take a snapshot of where Marathon County is as far as agriculture, as far as 2024 is concerned, right? Then what happens is that this plan is used to get tax credits for the farmers in Marathon County. So not supporting this plan also would jeopardize farmers from not getting those tax credits and probably mean that they would lose their farms, not be able to use their farms for food supply, right? As was also noted last Thursday, if we want to have more discussions about that in the comprehensive planning section, which will be coming up shortly, we can start having those discussions then, but I just don't think this is the tool to address those concerns. I'd ask you all to support the Farmland Preservation Plan as is presented in front of you this evening. Thank you.
Also, just a side note, that I think it was mentioned a little bit last Thursday, that if we were to make any changes to this, then we would go through the whole process again. The plan would have to go to the state for DADCAP for approval, and may tie it up at DADCAP and may come up back with recommendations for changes, and then that would make the process even further complicate the process, and then potentially risk the farmers for receiving the plan. And as noted, I think the proper place to have the discussion about solar is in our comprehensive plan. That is a plan that looks at the long-term future of the county. Other discussion? Other discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion is to approve the Farmland Preservation Plan update. Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to make one comment, and that is, regardless of any timeline, I think the most important decision that you make is the one in front of you, and that is related to plans and process and ordinance and such. If it affects the timeline, it affects the timeline, and we just have to then rely upon persons to take care of that. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, the motion is to approve the Farmland Preservation Plan update. We will proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried. Thank you, but not unanimous. We'll move on to item 18, D18, text amendment changes to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 17, by Tyler Seehafer, recommended for denial by ERC committee. Motion by Supervisor Marash. Turn it over to Corp Counsel.
So I just want to clarify the process and procedure and make sure we're all understanding what the motion is and what we would be voting on. So this text amendment was denied or recommended for denial at the Environmental Resources Committee. Under statute 5969 5E5, it still comes before this board, and this board can sustain that decision of the Environmental Resources Committee or refuse to deny the petition and refer it back to the committee with directions to draft an ordinance to effectuate the petition. So you're basically directing ERC to bring back an ordinance consistent with that original petition for the text amendment. So I want to make sure, Supervisor Marash, is your motion intended to sustain the Environmental Resources Committee's motion and recommendation?
Yes, it is to support the recommendation to deny.
And Supervisor, Vice Chair Dickinson, okay. So
can you remove the second? Okay, is there a second to sustain the motion, recommendation by the ERC committee? Looking for a second. Seconded by Supervisor Rosenberg. Now we're up for discussion. So the motion is to sustain or uphold the recommendation of denial by the ERC committee. That is the motion in front of you. And now the motion is up for debate. Any discussion? Supervisor Lemmer first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've spent maybe more time than I should have studying this issue because it's pretty complicated and very nuanced. I am no expert on farmland preservation or farm consolidations or general ag, but I think it does warrant some further clarity. One thing that is clearer to me is this is an ordinance that applies county-wide and to any town that is in farm preservation. 3 towns approved or accepted this amendment. I'm not understanding why we would give so much credence to the one who said no. And so for that reason, I'm inclined to refuse, to deny it. Now, I guess my further question is, do I have to recommend that it goes back, or just if this body denies it, does it automatically go back?
So the effect of a yes vote on this motion would be to sustain the Environmental Resources Committee's recommendation of a denial. The effect of a no vote on this motion would be to return this matter to the Environmental Resources Committee with the direction to draft an ordinance to effectuate the petition. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay.
The one caveat that I would provide to the discussion that was just had was this applies to townships that are exclusive ag zoned or farmland preservation zoned. It does not impact the towns that are not farmland preservation. So there's a distinct difference between the towns that are affected and the towns that are not affected. Supervisor Langenhan, please. Oops, excuse me, Supervisor Schoenborn first.
I just would, this kind of has touched me pretty, these people went through a lot already. And I don't feel that when they made their presentation to all of us, they're hardworking Americans, okay? And I'm looking out for them. I'm not taking sides. I would hopefully that we can look at this and address this, and let's give them the opportunity to present, because I don't think that when they were here that we gave them the ample time that they had put this all together. And I just would really like for them to, I'm not trying to make exceptions or anything like that, but for them to make the presentation to us and for all of us to really kind of take a look at it and make the best decision, because they are our bread and butter. And if we don't have them, how do we survive? Thank you.
Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to summarize my points that I made last Thursday, and then I've got a couple more points that I want to make this evening. Hopefully all of you had a chance to look at all the information for the meeting today. Hopefully those of you that weren't able to make the meeting last Thursday had a chance to listen to the discussion from last week by viewing the YouTube recording. I'm going to summarize why I believe that it's appropriate to sustain the ERC's recommendation to deny this text amendment proposal. So here are my 4 points. The proposed text amendment will lead to less farmland being farmed in Marathon County. This proposed text amendment is inconsistent with Marathon County's farmland preservation plan. This proposed text amendment was rejected by the Town of Marathon's Planning Commission and Town Board. This petition comes from a landowner in the Town of Marathon. The Town of Marathon is county owned and knows their lands best. We should respect their decisions. A couple other things I wanted to mention. There was a point made earlier this evening. Why is the town from which it's coming from, who recommended denial, why are they being given, or what's viewed as being given, more weight in the decision-making process? And I'll say this. If you look at the towns that, and I have to use a quotation mark here, supported the text amendment proposal, one took no position. That was from the town of Plover. One was from the town of McMillan, which is, in my opinion, not an agricultural capital of Marathon County, right? They definitely have a different community compared to the town of Marathon, which is exclusive ag zoned, right? And I think that being that we had two governing bodies in the town of Marathon, so that would be, 6 to 8 individuals. I'm not quite certain how many people are on the planning commission that recommended denial, each of them with different backgrounds, but each of them with ties to agriculture. I think that speaks volumes to how that will impact the town of Marathon. All right. And the town of Marathon has made this loud and clear. They do not want this. The last thing I will say, and I highlighted it last Thursday, I, as the chair, never put a limit on the amount of time that the individuals had to address the committee. If they wanted to go through their presentation, they were able to. I know the meeting was long, but everybody knew what was on the agenda. Everybody on the ERC should have expected a long meeting. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I'm asking members of this board to please sustain what the ERC has recommended. I believe a denial is very appropriate. Thank you.
Corp Counsel is asked to interject. Corp Counsel, please.
Thank you. Just really quickly, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to also clarify if I'm just responding to Supervisor Schoenborn's comments. If there was a desire to have the Environmental Resources Committee spend additional time either receiving information or undergoing an additional public hearing, that would require a motion to refer this back to the committee at this time. The effect of a no vote on the current motion would direct the Environmental Resources Committee to take this matter up and pass it to the board. So it wouldn't allow for that additional discussion. It would basically be directing them to send it back with an affirmative ordinance. Is that clearer? I don't see a lot of responses, so if you have questions, please let me know.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did watch the ERC meeting. I would say, as someone who has chaired meetings, I think there's potentially some things that, could have gone a little bit better. I'll leave it at that. I'm going to go through a couple points here. One, I do agree with Supervisor Lemmer. This is not just a town of Marathon issue. This is a countywide issue. And so we're looking at every, the farmland preservation. It's not just for this. It's how does this affect the rest of the county, because we're changing the ordinance. So it doesn't just apply to the town of Marathon. And it doesn't. I represent the town of McMillan, and maybe the town of McMillan doesn't have the amount of agriculture that maybe some others do, but they do have agriculture, and I think it does affect them. There was an argument made in that meeting that if it hasn't happened before, well, this has never happened before, so therefore we shouldn't do it. Well, there's lots of things that haven't happened before, and one of the reasons you create policy is to prepare yourself for when something is happening and when it will happen. So I don't really think that that's a good argument to just say, we shouldn't move forward because it hasn't happened before. And one of the other arguments was, we've never had a citizen bring forward such a thing. Well, it was acknowledged that under the statute, they have that ability too. And I will say this, for Mr. Daigle and Mr. Seehafer to come forward, and the presentation that they gave in the ERC meeting was fantastic. I looked at Mr. Seehafer and the way he composed himself and the explanation and the information that they both gave as tremendous. And that would be someone, honestly, who could be an elected official, who can be in this room making decisions. So I thought that was great, and I appreciate that. Fourth thing is, they worked with CPZ extensively to draft the language that we have and that was given to ERC and is in front of us. It wasn't as if they went off on some tangent and just said, well, we're just going to try to do something. They went through all the steps to try to figure out what would be the best language to present this to us. And in many ways, if you listen to the ERC meeting, there really wasn't a significant pushback from CPZ in any way. There was just conversations that if this were to pass, I believe then it has to go back to DATCAP. There has to be, and so then there's a question, I guess, about farmland preservation plan, if this affects that. But anyhow, I don't think it was reckless. the way it was brought forward, it was kind of commented that it was like reckless how this was brought forward. It really doesn't, I don't think it really impacts the loss of farmland in any way. In this particular example, there is no loss of farmland. It's a moving of a location of that building. And I thought it was a very interesting point that Mr. Seehafer brought up in that meeting, that if you were to move that building, if you took that house off that foundation and you moved it 1 foot or 10 feet, that would make that house a new house. And that's just incredibly strange to me, that we would have current, this isn't for what he's proposing, but what our current rules are. And the last thing, Mr. Daigle, and I believe he used to work for the county, he pointed out some really interesting things in that it's actually consistent with farmland preservation, moving the house to the corner, not in the center. It's easier to operate the facility, it increases the farmland, and it reduces any conflict with residents. So I see no reason under all of those things, and I appreciate the ERC's, looking at that, but it was a 5-4 vote. And I really believe that there is enough here to move forward with it, and so that is where I would like it to go. Thank you.
Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify a couple things. I want to start with a question to Corporation Counsel. Now, our discussion here this evening specifically to do with the language that's in front of us, not any specific situation that might be playing out with the applicant, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Second thing I want to say is that comment, which I think was directed towards what I offered for discussion last Thursday, which had to do with the reckless term, that was in regards to how this county wants to promote agriculture. And I think the common sense idea is that if you move a building to another part of that parcel, split it off, and put a building up on that other 35.01 acres, it's common sense, folks. You will have less ag in this county. It is clear. Last thing I want to mention, and it's an important idea for every single person in this room because we all represent different communities. We should not abandon our partners, especially ones that have taken the time to be involved in this process. That includes the town of Marathon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Ritter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, I've got a bit more history on this. Vice Chair Dickinson had said that it seems kind of like CPZ was going along with everything. The original time I heard about all this was at the Board of Adjustment, because our land use manager at CPZ originally said that this did not go with farm consolidation. So originally CPZ was against it. And the Board of Adjustments agreed to not, that there wasn't enough evidence to go against staff. So just as a matter of clarification for anybody that might not know the history on this, just to help you make better decisions. Thank you.
Supervisor Sandusky, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I had one constituent in my district that contacted me from the farming community. They told me to deny it, but I have questions too as to why this wasn't looked at before the house was moved, like getting the stuff changed prior, as far as that goes. Is, doing it as a pre instead of afterthought. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Supervisor Langenhan, third and final time.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify one thing that I had mentioned previously. The reason I mentioned county-zone towns in particular is because Marathon County has been, Town of Marathon has been a really strong partner with us. They're one of the 18 or 19 towns that have been with the county, and they provide a lot of input in the past with that. Now, the exclusive ag, which I think you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, which has to do specifically with farmland preservation, yes, that is what this will affect. So that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? So again, let's be clear on what you're voting on. A yes vote will uphold the denial to make the change. A no vote will send it back to the ERC committee with direction to draft an ordinance that is consistent with what the text amendment change was directed initially. A yes vote, upholds the decision that the ERC committee move forward. A no vote will send it back to the ERC committee with direction to create an ordinance that's consistent with the text amendment requests. Is everybody clear on what they're voting on? Again, is everybody clear on what they're voting on? I don't want anybody to vote that doesn't understand what they're voting on. All right, we will proceed to vote. I need Supervisor Marshall and Supervisor DeBrew. And we will proceed. A motion is carried. The denial is upheld. Moving on to resolutions from the Environmental Resources Committee and Human Resources Finance and Property Committee. A resolution to accept the $66,500 grant funds from DADCAP to host a producer-led regional event highlighting community partnerships and practices that further conservation efforts in the state. Resolution R-26-24. Motion by Supervisor Seifelt, seconded by Supervisor Zhang. Any discussion? This is a budget amendment, does require a 2/3 majority vote. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried but is not unanimous. Moving on to item F, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, item F20. Whoops. Yes, okay. F20, initial resolution approving revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle Wireless LLC. Information with respect to the job impact and project will be available at the time of consideration of the resolution. Resolution R-28-24. Motion by Supervisor Zhang and seconded by Supervisor Robinson. In discussion, Supervisor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are joined tonight by Scott Feld, who's from Bug Tussle, if anyone has any questions. But at the last meeting of both the HR Finance and Property Committee and the County Board, there were questions relative to the proposal, and we have provided 3 years of audited results from for you in a pro forma based on the new proposed project. In talking to Mitch Olson, their chief counsel, today we've requested that they give us a updated pro forma for both the new borrowing as well as the November 2021. But we're at an initial resolution stage where there are a number of issues that we'll want to talk through and resolve before the final resolution comes before the county board later this summer, early fall. This is a request that will deal with two issues. One is the 2021 agreement that we had with Bug Tussle and 4 other counties relative to the building of the towers and the fiber throughout the county, 190 miles of fiber in the 16 or 18 towers. In the county, we partnered with them, and they access conduit bonding or a lower interest rate. And we, in turn, along with the other counties, guaranteed prepayment. The original issue was $78 million. 25 of that went to Marathon County. Only 21 went into the project. The rest went into carrying costs. There's a requirement that there be a reserve that will pay for 2 years of payments, which gives us ample opportunity to determine whether or not they're performing financially. If they aren't, we have the ability to seize those assets as the creditor first in line. We're not anticipating that would happen. But in exchange, the county also received, again, access to those towers, space on those towers, which has been very critical for law enforcement when the Dancy Tower went down. And we're receiving 24 strands of fiber in that conduit, in that 190 miles of conduit. And Jerry Klein is here from the city county IT department. That conduit and those strands are important to us to be able to carry out some of our functions, whether it's for law enforcement or for serving some of our buildings. And they're coming before us to ask for funding, supplemental funding for that request that would allow them to complete that project. We are financial partners with them, and we will share in their success and we will share in their failure. I'd prefer to share in their success. They are providing us 40 basis points or 0.4% of payment for any outstanding obligation. We've collected $200,000 to date under that scenario. But we are a partner, and if we don't approve the conduit borrowing, it will slow the project down, which results in two things: delayed access to service by our residents, and potentially putting that project at risk, which we're trying not to do. I think it's prudent for us to do that. The second part of this is the funding for the what is now known as the Leather Camp project, serving the Croninwater, Knowlton, and Gunther, portions of those, with fiber to the premise. And that was based on a March 2022 Public Service Commission grant. They requested $3 million from the PSC and received that grant. And again, approached us for $1.5 million grant. We said no, we will fund it at a different level. They requested then that we provide a loan to them, again, a guaranteed loan. And those provisions all of those provisions will be worked out between now and the final resolution. But this lets us continue down that pathway. We'll be joining several other counties that are working with Bug Tussle to improve not only provide not only fiber to the premise, but improve Wi-Fi, fixed-based Wi-Fi, and cellular service to the residents of the county. And if you have any questions for Bug Tussle, I would encourage you to ask them.
Other questions? Supervisor Jacobson, please.
This is a point of information and perhaps best for Supervisor Robinson. I was here in March 2022 still when we had that discussion, but when did we learn that we could not do a borrowing with ARPA money for the $3 million?
Supervisor Robinson, please.
It was, we had the infrastructure committee meeting, and ARPA was on the table. It went through HR Finance Committee, and ARPA was on the table. It was post-finance, pre-county board, where we checked with, I believe, Andy Phillips from the Wisconsin Counties, the legal counsel for the Wisconsin Counties Association. Due to the duration of the loan, it was found that it was not eligible for ARPA funding. We are using ARPA funding for a portion of that. They have the $3 million. We are providing a forgivable loan of $142,000 based upon $235 per passing, which is what we pledged to Frontier and Serenity in that same grant cycle. So that will be funded through ARPA, but the balance would be funded through the conduit borrowing. We had looked at the possibility of using fund balance as a way of doing that, but the concerns are a 30-year length, 30-year note in use of the fund balance seemed like an excessive period of time. So when they came forward with the conduit bonding, it made sense for us to look at that.
I had one other point of information for the September, if we get to September, for the September vote, will there be a divided question between the Leather Camp and the other piece of it, the conduit bonding? Or perhaps can there be?
As Corp Counsel, I don't know that that's been raised, that question's been raised. That's something that can be can be researched between now the initial resolution and the time. So we could negotiate those potential parameters. To go back to the first question, to provide a little bit of clarity on the first question, and that was, it was determined that we couldn't use ARPA because the repayment of ARPA, or repayment of loan from ARPA proceeds would have to be respent before December of 2026 and reallocated before December of 2024 to be qualified under even lost revenue. So because we're recovering those funds, that was not the intent of ARPA, and therefore ARPA was not available for that initial on the other portion of the 3 million minus the 142,000. Did you want to address? Corp Counsel will also try to help maybe clarify the question about whether it would be two separate issues.
Sure. I don't have an answer for you right now. That isn't something that we've looked into yet. It could be something that could be looked into. So I don't have an intelligent answer for you right now.
Right, and my only concern in raising that is because I would suspect that it'd be rather difficult to divide it into two bond issuances. So I raise that just because if there is interest in supporting one but not the other, I think tonight is the point to have that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we originally approved 25 million, but now we're back asked to approve an additional 12 million. That's like a 48% off the budget, off of the contract. Things are, from what I understand, is 18 towers, 190 middle mile fiber. And the question is it's going to get built. It's just a matter of whether it gets built quickly or not quickly. We're asked to ignore the fact that we have a debt limit ordinance. We're also asked to look at this as a 30-year project, and typically counties can only borrow up to 20 years. And I'm sure that limit is there for a reason. So I think we have a lot more risk, and I'm not sure why we can't hold a contractor accountable to the current or what they signed up for originally.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
I'll try to answer those. We're talking about two different projects. One which was not on the table when the November 2021 resolution was adopted, and that is the Leather Camp project, that $3 million. And when we first started talking, we were talking about an $8 million shortfall for the two projects, and we didn't build in those reserve costs and other costs. That's where a good portion of that is, and that's to secure our interest, quite honestly, and protect our interest as a county. This is not general obligation bonding. It is conduit bonding. It is not all that different than revenue bonding and other things that the county will do, but it doesn't count against our statutory cap. And I'll let the the Corporation Council, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and the 30 years was based upon their projected payback. And again, I think because we're using conduit borrowing, some of those applicable state laws that would bind us don't bind this issuance.
Corp Counsel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to speak to the debt limit in particular, it is correct that the county is not issuing the debt under a conduit bonding situation. The risk that the county assumes is through the guarantee that's involved with conduit bonding in this case, because we would be guaranteeing if Bug Tussle defaulted on its payments and its parent company defaulted on the payments, we would be guaranteeing that those payments continue to be made. So we're required to set aside or reserve a particular percentage of our debt issuance capacity to be able to handle that if it were to occur. And it's really one of the questions before you is, weighing the risk. What is the risk of that happening? And if you move forward with the initial resolution, one of our jobs as staff is to try to put as much protection in place through the guarantee agreements and through the other agreements that we reach with Bug Tussle to make sure that there is sufficient collateral in place to protect the county and other as many guarantees as possible. But that's the risk. That's the monetary financial risk to the county.
Supervisor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if Bug Tussle defaults and the county takes ownership of conduit, towers, and some or all completed infrastructure, could the county face any challenges finding a provider to utilize the county-owned assets? It was mentioned in former presentations that this county-owned approach was not of interest to these providers at the onset of these projects.
Supervisor Robinson.
I'll try to address that. I think you're referencing the study that we did with Design 9 that was released in 2020 prior to the pandemic, and the county had retained Design 9 to look at an earlier study, and they came back with a series of 36 towers, and conduit connecting it. At a cost of $30+ million. Once we received that report, we sat down with the internet service providers and said, if we built this, will you rent it from us? They said no, they wouldn't. Everybody was going their own different way, and then the pandemic hit. And as a result of the pandemic, several things happened. There was a significant demand, for services, and there was a significant infusion of dollars into expanding broadband through the county. I think you need to understand several things. The business model is to build the towers for fixed wireless, but also they're providing access to AT&T and other vendors that use those towers, and they have a significant interest in those towers. And the fiber that connects them is middle mile fiber. It helps with the speed and reduces latency when you're communicating through those towers. So there will be a market for that information. We are prohibited as a county from providing last mile or from the conduit, the middle mile conduit to the home. State law prohibits us from doing that. That's why we were relying on the internet service providers. I don't know if things would change if we were to take that Design 9 study out there. The only thing that has changed is that was based on a Wi-Fi or tower-based system. People aren't doing that. The federal government through FCC and National Telephonic Information Administration is not funding Wi-Fi services. They're looking at fiber to the premise because of permanency, reduce of latency, reliability, and a number of other factors. So that design for that point in time was a good design based upon the funding and opportunities that are available today. I'm not so sure that it is a viable approach today.
Other discussion? Supervisor Jacobson, please.
I guess my only concern with this was, I was supportive in moving forward 2 years ago when, this was going to be ARPA funded through borrowing. My concern with this is the security of it and the length of it. It is a 30-year bond. I think back to 30 years ago, and I think I was using a Tanday computer, if anybody remembers those, in my parents' basement with a printer paper that had the holes on the side. I think back to, when I was in law school, I think I still have that computer in my basement with a couple BlackBerries that are obsolete. So that's, and I don't mean to be facetious, but that really is my concern, is that, what business is Bug Tussle or its parent company going to be in, if any, 30 years from now? I hope they're successful and have expanded, but if they're not, and really the county's recourse is taking possession of severely obsolete equipment, that is my concern for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Okay, just to be clear, the motion is to approve the initial resolution. Again, this is not committing the board or this county to bonding. It is committing the board to doing additional research. It is a simple majority required on this vote, but in the future vote, if there is a future vote moving forward on bonding, that would require a 3/4 majority. So again, just to be clear, this is a simple majority to move it forward for additional discussion, but is putting the system on notice that the county potentially has the intent of moving forward on this project, on this bonding issue. Everybody clear on what you're voting on? Okay, we will proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried, but is not unanimous. We'll move on to item F21, adoption of the 2025 budget priorities and guidelines, resolution 29-24. Supervisor Marash with a motion, Supervisor Conway with the second. Any discussion on the motion and budget priorities and guidelines? Any discussion? Okay, we seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item F22, a resolution approving the sale to Habitat for Humanity, resolution R-30-24. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Zhang and seconded by Supervisor Crivelli. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and it is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item F23, a resolution approving the sale of to Opportunity Inc., resolution 31-24. Motion by Supervisor Crivelli and seconded by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. And we'll proceed. And the motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item G. Item G24, announcements and or requests. Any announcements and or requests? Okay, seeing none, we're down to... Supervisor Robinson, please. Excuse me.
I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to, in front of everyone, thank Christy Palmer for her 30 years of service to the county as our finance director. I don't know that she's here tonight, but she's usually listening. And if she is, I just wanted to point out she's been a tremendous asset and a value to us in preparing our budgets, understanding our fiscal situation, and we wish her well in her retirement.
Okay, any other announcements and/or requests? Supervisor Robinson, another one? Or, never mind. Any other announcements and/or requests? All right, we are down to item number 25. What is your pleasure? Vice Chair Dickinson with the motion, Supervisor Longenhahn with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.